Hi, I'm Joy Baldridge, and I'm here to bring a little more joy to your world with 20 minutes of joy in the morning. Happy Saturday. And we're going to talk today about efficiency, how to be more efficient, how to be more effective. Also, I've got Bob here. Remember Bob? Bob's all about being flexible and adaptable. It's about stretching yourself to the limit, but also not to get all stressed out while you're doing it. When I think about efficiency, I think about perception. Because everything really is a perception. How do you perceive yourself? How do you see your day? How do you see the way that you handle time and tasks and projects? Think about that for a moment. On a scale of 1 to 10, how efficient are you? 10 being exceedingly efficient and 1 being awful, dismally inefficient. Think about that for a second. And then when we talk about efficiency, we have to talk about effectiveness. Because you can be very efficient and get something done very quickly. But if it's not effective, if there's a typo, if you hit the send button just a little too soon on that email, you will realize that you were not effective, even though you were on a roll and in the flow and getting it all done. You have to be effective as well. Now, I had a talk show on Cablevision where I interviewed CEOs and presidents of Fortune 500 companies, because in the New York area, there's many CEOs who live and work here. And so I called several. I called about 20 people who were the CEO and president of places like Xerox and IBM and Pepsi and Cadbury Schweppes and Times Mirror and lots of places. And out of 20 calls to CEOs of corporations, how many do you think said yes, they would be on my talk show about how to be more efficient and effective and successful at work, how to make it to the C-suite? 19 said yes. And so, of course, I wanted 20. And so I kept calling the person who was saying no and saying, please, why don't you be on my show? I'd love to have you on my show. And he said no, that he was kind of camera shy. And then I found out a few years later why he wasn't on the show. He was actually arrested for embezzlement. So, yikes, I guess he didn't want to be on the show because 2 years later, he'd probably not be around. So the problem with that is that I was very interested in just seeing what is efficiency, what is effectiveness. And when I interviewed these top people and asked, how did you get to the top? I got a whole variety of answers. I got from IBM that it was continuous education, and also was mentioning integrity. And integrity, I said, what do you mean by integrity? And the answer was that integrity is a code of conduct. A code of conduct means that if you're invited to my meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning and you come at 9:01, you're no longer invited to my meeting. And I thought, wow, that's very harsh. You know, a lot of people think about the last time you actually got to a 9 o'clock meeting at 9 o'clock. But that was the standard back in the day when I had this interview, and that was the way it worked. So being efficient as well as effective is what we're here to talk about. So one of the CEOs that I spoke with, he said that he would ask himself a question every business day. 220 business days a year for 10 years. And that's how we got to the top. And you're probably wondering, well, what was the question? The question was, what's the one thing I can do to further my success for tomorrow? What's the one thing I can do to further my success for tomorrow? And he would do that one thing, and then he would leave his day feeling satisfied. Think about the last time you left your day feeling satisfied. A lot of times people leave their day and they don't feel satisfied. They feel like they didn't get enough accomplished. They look at the to-do list and say, what did I really get done here? And it's not a good feeling leaving the day many a time. So how do you leave the day feeling satisfied? Well, he said that if he said to himself, the self-question, what's the one thing I can do to further my success for tomorrow? And then he would do that one thing that would make him feel like he was quite accomplished. And then he could leave the day behind and move on to the evening and enjoy the evening. And that led for a very balanced existence. So you may want to embrace this concept. All you have to do is ask yourself, what's the one thing I can do to further my success for tomorrow? I like that expression so much that I actually made a button out of it. What's the one thing that you can do to further your success for tomorrow. Because it really is about tomorrow, the future. You're spending the rest of your life there. So what are you going to do to make it really terrific? And yesterday is gone. I remember a quote from my son when he was 5. He was grounded for not listening, and he couldn't bring Scooby-Doo to show and tell, and he was very upset. He had to bring this little rubber frog, and he went to show and tell. He did his thing. He came home. He was very mad. And I said, Wilson, I said, if you had just listened to me yesterday, we wouldn't be in this predicament. And he clenched his fist with rage and he screamed, Mom, it will never be yesterday, so why do you keep talking about it? And I thought, that's genius. And I grabbed a pen and a piece of paper and I wrote it down because I was like, it will never be yesterday. And then I wasn't sure if it was a good quote because, a child said this, a 5-year-old. So I asked a client, I called up a client and I said, my son said some words. I thought they were pretty powerful. I said, what do you think? She said, what did he say? I said, he said, it will never be yesterday, so why do you keep talking about it? And she said, oh, I would say that quote every time you speak for all the audiences at the conventions or even in the training rooms. And I was like, why? And she said, it would have saved me 10 years of therapy. And I thought, you know what? She's right. 10 years of therapy because we keep dwelling on the past, something we can't do anything about. So how do we work towards the future? We ask ourselves this question every single day. What's the one thing I can do to further my success for tomorrow? Because, I have a because badge. Because it will never be yesterday. Here it is. It'll never be yesterday, so why keep talking about it? And so when I was thinking about your world and the persistence of the perception, it reminded me of a man named Jerome Bruner at Harvard University, and you can Google him. Jerome Bruner was all about persistence of perception, and I had heard of him through my father, who was a very smart, well-read person, and he said, you really have to be aware of how you perceive the world in order to be more efficient. And I said, why is that? And he said, because you fall into these traps at times. Everybody falls into traps at times where they kind of accept the way things are and they don't really look for positive change or ways to continuously improve. And continuous improvement is really the key to living a positive and prosperous and progressive life. And so I thought about this persistence of perception. What it truly means is the way you see your world persists unless something interrupts it, or there's some drastic change that makes you drastically change, or you just make a decision to change. And so I thought about that a while, and I went to a gas station, and I went inside to get some drinks. And when I went inside, I noticed that there was this empty can of paint and this paintbrush, and the can of paint was rusted, and it was just on a windowsill. And I thought, that's what persistence of perception means. That can of paint has probably been there for years. And yet, the people who own or work in this gas station, they turn a blind eye to it. They don't even see it anymore. It's like it doesn't exist. But me walking in for the first time and seeing it, I thought, oh, what's that can of paint doing there? It looks like it's been there for years. Why don't they just throw it away? It's useless. And so that's kind of the thought behind it. But I really didn't understand persistence of perception until my dryer broke. So I was in the laundry room doing laundry, and I pulled the dryer handle off the dryer. It just came right off in my hand. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do now? So my husband, being a builder, I said, Bill, help. I need help. And he said, what's the problem? And I said, well, here, look, the dryer handle just fell off in my hand. And he said, oh, well, if you take that handle, you turn it upside down, you put it into the slot, you pull up, you pull back, you can open the dryer door. I said, great. So I started to do that until the screws got stripped and I couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't working. The tool did not work anymore. So he said, oh, well, here, just take this screwdriver, put it in the slot, pull out, pull back, you'll get the door open. And I thought, isn't there a better way? But I did it, and it worked great until I lost the screwdriver. So then I said, help, what do I do? Can we just get a new dryer? That would be nice. And he said, yeah, I'm doing some research on that. Do you know people who research things like for a long time? So I said, okay, what's the solution now? So we have now this magnet, and it's on the dryer door, and then we have these pliers, and he said, all you have to do is you just straddle the magnet with the pliers and you squeeze real hard and you pull back and the door will open. And I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And sure enough, it did work. It was a great solution to a temporary problem. But I wanted a permanent solution. And that's what I was seeking. Well, I used this system for quite some time, and then I got used to it, and it wasn't such a big deal anymore until a friend of mine came around, and she said, can I borrow your dryer? And I said, sure. I said, here's how it works. All you have to do is you turn this knob to the temperature, and then you turn this knob to the amount of time that you'd like to dry your clothes, and then you take these pliers and you straddle this magnet and you squeeze hard and pull back, and there you go. You can open the dryer door and dry your clothes. And she had the laundry basket on her hip and with the wet clothes in it. And she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm showing you how to dry the clothes. And she said, don't you think there's a better way? And I said, yes, but I either need a new dryer or I need a new husband. And she laughed and she said, I vote for the new dryer. I said, yeah, me too. So think about the story. I mean, I got used to this way of doing something that was very different than a convenient way. Have you done this? I mean, a simple thing, perhaps at work, where you have a Post-it note and you've got 5 phone numbers on it and it's just stuck to your bulletin board because you never give yourself 2 minutes to just input it into your database. And then, oh no, the note now falls down because the paste on the back of the sticky note is losing its zeal here. And then, or it just knocks over or it pushes aside, and then you wonder, where'd the note go? And it's this crazy convoluted system that you just have because you haven't just taken a few minutes to think, what is the perception of my world right now? And as my friend asked, you can ask yourself, don't you think that there's a better way? So you can look at anything and think to yourself, how can I make this a better way? Because the more efficient you are, the better you're going to have as an outcome, as long as you don't get so efficient that errors tend to happen. So let's review a few of these ideas. First of all, you want to make sure that if you think, what's the one thing I can do to further my success for tomorrow, you can also leave your day feeling satisfied. And remember that it will never be yesterday, so why keep talking about it? Unless it's a happy memory that you want to revisit and cherish and reminisce with friends, that's fine. But a lot of times we beat ourselves up over things that we did yesterday, how we didn't make the right decisions, or if we only did this, if we only did that, and it just becomes so torturous and counterproductive. And then keep in mind that the future is really where you're after, and how can you look at your world differently? The persistence of perception is real. You will continue to see your world exactly how you see it, and it will stay very much the same unless you interrupt it. The way you can interrupt it is you can look with new eyes where you are. You can look around your office. You can look around into your database. You can look at ways to be more efficient and make some positive changes. Another quote that I like very much, the quote is, minor change equals major impact. Minor change equals major impact. So if you make the minor change, just one little change, it can change everything. And sometimes you just don't have the time to do it. A lot of people don't have time to do it. I don't have time to make these changes. I just have to get this project done, or I have to get on this. I'm on a deadline. Minor change equals major impact. And so I was writing a book a few years ago, and I had a publisher, and the publisher said, can you write the book in a year's time? I said, sure. Signed the contract. Everything was great. And then the publisher contacted me a few weeks later and said, could you do it in 6 months? Because the person that was going to be in the funnel before you, in the queue, they can't do it in a timely manner. I said, sure, I'll do it in 6 months, no problem. And then I got another phone call a few months later, and they said, can you get this done a little bit sooner, like a few months before we had recommended or we agreed to? I had a 3-year-old at the time. I was traveling every week, as I still do, and I said, okay, sure, why not? So I had to do something different to get this accomplished in the time that I had promised. So I came up with this method because I kept not getting it done in my promises to myself. So I call this method the crazy glue method. The crazy glue method is where I would pretend that I put crazy glue on the seat in front of my computer and I would sit, which meant that I was stuck and I could not get up no matter what. So I would set myself up for this because I knew if I wrote for 4 hours straight that I would get something accomplished and I would be very efficient and I would be very effective because I would have a big chunk of time with absolutely no interruptions. And so I didn't know what else to call it because I kept trying to do it and I needed a name for it. So now I know, and you know, it's the crazy glue method of production, which means that you get rid of all your interruptions and you put that crazy glue, hypothetically, on your chair and sit, and you just don't get up until you get something, some traction or something accomplished. And I have another button that I like very much, and it says, "This cannot continue." Sometimes there are things that you have to say no to. Sometimes you have to just take things out of your world and change that landscape. And so is there anything you can think of where you're saying to yourself, you know what, this cannot continue, this must stop? And when you say that to yourself, this cannot continue, this must stop, what's the one thing I can do to further my success to getting this to stop? Now, getting something to stop could be someone interrupting you in the office and you just can't continue any longer. So you have to have what I call an expectation conversation with that person and readjust or reevaluate the expectations of how you're going to be working together, because they have to shift, they have to change, because this cannot continue. It's just not working for you. And you do it in a very nice, very kind way so that everybody, is working nicely together, because that's really effective and efficient too, to have a good work relationship with people. Also, a way to be efficient is when you're calling somebody or you're stopping by somebody's desk or you're even emailing a person or texting, there is a phrase that I've used in the past that has gotten me further along by getting information faster. And this is the phrase. The phrase is, I just needed to know. Just needed to know. Just makes it a simple request, needed to know, makes it easy. It's just a few words. And I'll give you an example. I was a recruiter and I used to place people in sales jobs. And as a recruiter, I had to get people interviews, or I didn't get paid because it was a straight commission position. And so I would call people like managers and say, I've got a great candidate for you. And then the manager would say, I'm in a meeting. And then I'd say, oh, I'm sorry to bother you. And I'd hang up. I said, I'll call you later. And I wasn't getting any traction when I was doing this. So I thought, this isn't working. I can't keep just saying, okay, bye. I have to say something different. So I thought, what can I say? So on the next call, I said to the guy, I just needed to know, are you free tomorrow at 2 o'clock for an interview? And he said yes, and I hung up, and there we were. He probably made a note of it, and we got somewhere with that. And you can do this with anything. Have you ever been on a project and you needed information from people? Or have you ever been in a sales position and you needed to know where you were in the sales cycle from the potential client or the client? If you just say this quick, at the ready, just needed to know, you're going to get further along in the process. And it's a very efficient way to gather information, but also not be too pushy. So keep in mind the just needed to know and see how it can work for you and how it can help you in getting information efficiently, effectively, so that you're not just stuck in different parts of your day because you're counting on other people to help you with that information. So as we finish up, I like to end with a quote. And there's a quote that I like very much, and it's the quote that says, when nothing is certain, anything is possible. And another quote, which is, all good things come to those who go after it, not to those who wait. So if all good things come to those who go after it, make this an amazing day and enjoy every minute and Make sure to be efficient and effective in what you do by looking at your world with new eyes. And please like and share this live Joy Baldridge 20 minutes of joy in the morning, and have an awesome day. Bye.